Friends and foes of the show, welcome back to episode number 11 of Ramblers Radio. We are here after 2 weeks, a little late because we got
hmm
a big discussion to be had today. But we are here. I'm just coming back from vacation. It was pretty fun, kind of needed it. But now we're back on the grind. The podcast grind is going to be real, for real. We're going to make some big changes coming pretty soon. Um, But
Absolutely.
yeah. Code, how we doing, man? How we doing?
Hey, we're doing pretty great. I know you had a pretty fun week. You kind of talked about it. You got the Mando helmet back there. That's pretty fire. The T-shirt. That's pretty sick. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, I've had a good past couple weeks. It's been a little crazy. Had some family things going on, but we're chilling now. We're here to hop on the grind. A few weeks left of school. And then after that, I'm all in.
yep. So I've also been doing pretty good. I recently visited Galaxy's Edge as of yesterday, literally. I got a couple things. I got the Mandalorian helmet. I got a Black Spire Outpost poster, and I did give me a 25th anniversary Phantom Menace T-shirt. Did not cop a lightsaber this time. It's something that I did usually do, but I think I'm getting pretty close to where I don't really have satisfaction with buying anymore because they're like 200
For
bucks
sure.
each. If I were to buy
And they're
one,
not even the highest quality you could find.
I'd probably get the Kanan Jarrus one because that's the only one that I'd want that I like don't have yet. But like the other ones I don't care much about. Like there's like the Ezra lightsaber, the Plo Koon lightsaber. Like they're not memorable lightsabers, so I just kind
Yeah.
of let those be. I recently within the past couple years I've gotten the Qui-Gon lightsaber, the episode 2 Obi-Wan lightsaber, the Cal Kestis lightsaber. I've gotten all the ones that I really want. So we kind of skipped out on that, and we're probably gonna skip out within the next few years or so, unless something retires. Then I'll cop that for sure if I find it desirable enough. But yeah, we also went on a Disney cruise. If you guys are big enough
Sure.
fans and you do find it financially suitable for you, I do recommend going. It was not kind to my savings account. I will say that it was not kind to me, but it was fun nonetheless. My only critique of them is that sometimes the movie theaters are kind of whack because they only show the films that are currently like airing in like actual theaters. Like the only movies they had were like two Pixar movies that are like mid AF and like nobody knows about them. Uh, and then there was the
Mhm.
Marvels, which I watched. And it was as about as good as I expected it to be. It was a solid 6 out of 10, 5.5 out of 10.
That
Yeah.
sounds like a waste of time. That,
Yeah, hour
yeah,
and 45 minutes, but I didn't really have anything else to do, so yeah, that was that. Uh, like, show me some. Like the last time I went, the first time I went was like 2017, I think. And they had Rogue One and Doctor Strange. I was feasting with that because those are two
that's awesome.
incredible movies. And then we kind of go to
Yeah,
this. So yeah, in a time where there's no Star Wars films right now, and Marvel's
yeah,
just mid AF. But that's okay. Uh, that's what I've been up to, and I'm back, and I'm gonna have to make my money back somehow. But we're good. We'll be good. Um, but yeah. So code, let me know. What are some news we got? What are the news we got?
well, you missed quite a bit while you were gone. We have a bit of a longer news segment today, so I'm gonna go through it a little bit faster. Number one, we're gonna start off with some fun news. This one's pretty funny. George Lucas has come out and he said that the Obi-Wan Kenobi show is one of his favorite things that
I've
he's
seen
ever
this.
seen of Star Wars. So I've been trying to tell you guys that George Lucas is a nutcase, and if you didn't believe me, now you should. So that's out there. Yeah, George Lucas with his whack opinions, his whack ideas. He's a character for sure. Coming up next, a rather exciting one for a lot of you 2010s, 2000s kids. We're getting a Lego Star Wars show. It's called Rebuild the Galaxy, and it's basically an alternate timeline where things get messed up in like a multiversal setting, which is really cool. We're gonna get to see Jedi Bob and Darth Jar Jar finally, which is amazing. Looks like they got Ahmed Best for that, which is cool. Um, so that's exciting, honestly. I'm sure it's going to be very kiddish, as are like the holiday specials the past few years and all of the previous Lego Star Wars shows. But it'll be a fun watch. It comes out September 13th, so be on the lookout for that. Coming up next, last week we had the release of Tales of the Empire, which I know in Smokes and I opinion was very mid, very mid. Um, didn't I mean it filled in gaps, but it wasn't anything very interesting. Nothing we really needed to see. And personally, I think the Bear storyline was very underbaked and pretty mid. So coming up next, yeah, coming up next, we have a smaller piece of news that has flown under the radar, and it's that Jedi Fallen Order has topped Australia and New Zealand game sale charts the past week. So I don't know how that happened. That was kind of out of the blue.
Oi, oi,
It beat
oi.
games like Helldivers, which is pretty crazy. Which I'm proud of that game, man. It's a stellar game. It's a stellar game. With all the May 4th sales, I assume that's where that came from. Um, our next two pieces of news are going to be the Phantom Menace news. I'm sure, as most of you guys knew, the Phantom Menace re-released in theaters last weekend, and it became the number one most streamed movie on Disney Plus, which is that's something. That's something. I don't think it's very warranted, but there it is. Coming up next, another piece of Phantom Menace news. This is more just with the fan base. People are starting to like switch up on this movie and say that it's like a masterpiece and we need to revisit it. And I just want to give you guys a little reality check. This movie isn't good, so you need to shut up like immediately. So, last piece of news: Star Wars Fortnite. By the time you guys see this video, Star Wars Fortnite will be gone, but we have like a day or two left. Cool collab, got some cool new skins. Some items, things like that. Star Wars Fortnite, always a fun thing. And unless I'm forgetting anything, that is all our major news for this week.
Yeah. I didn't have any huge expectations for the Fortnite Star Wars event. I mean, it was supposed to be better than what we got. It was supposed to be very similar to the update we got
Yeah,
last year, which that update was peak, by the way. That was a very good update.
that was, yeah.
Um, but
I'm
this
very
update we only
underwhelmed that
had,
the mini pass we got was Lego.
yeah, but the only thing we got was like you can only get one lightsaber. There's no force abilities. The Wookiee
No,
Bowcat, the E11 blaster is back, which is like just bad. It's like the worst weapon in the history of Fortnite.
garbage.
And
Yeah.
the Wookiee Bowcaster isn't very great either. So because of the
Yeah.
delay, but yeah,
If it had more splash damage, it could be useful, but no.
and I
Yeah,
have
most of the meat of this collab is in Lego Fortnite, which is unfortunate. If you're really into Lego Fortnite, this collab is phenomenal. But if you're not, it's kind of mid.
yeah, I have played the Lego Fortnite update. I played it for a while, but like nobody can actually like play Lego Fortnite for a very long time. It just kind of gets dull after a while, so it just kind of is what it
No.
is. Yeah,
Yeah.
and even then, like that update's like not really that big. But we did get some skins that definitely deserved it. I personally copped. Did I cop? No, I didn't cop the Death Trooper, but I copped the other three. I got the Chewie
I
skin,
want that
Dagobah
Death
Luke,
Trooper,
and
man.
I also got Lando. Even because I really liked, even though
Yeah.
even though I won't use him that much, I really like his Cloud City back bling. I think that one's pretty neat. Um,
Yeah, Lando's pretty cool. I'm probably never gonna wear him. I didn't get him because I knew I wasn't gonna wear him very much. But I had to get Dagobah Luke. That was a phenomenal skin. Super clean, great back bling that's been disabled for days now, and they took him out of the shop. Please put him back in so I can get the C-3PO back bling. Um,
yeah. Oh, that's another
the
thing I
Death
want to get the
Trooper,
C3PO. Yeah.
Yeah, the Death Trooper, pretty sick as well, but the back bling doesn't really go with it, which kind of sucks. Um, but yeah, good skins, but not a very great collab to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. But it is what it is. I mean, there wasn't really much going on. It's original trilogy, and much of the original characters are already in the game. So yeah, it just
Yeah,
kind of
it
went
got
away.
very overshadowed by that Avatar update before was much better.
Yeah. And then the season's going to be ending in the next couple weeks. So if you do
Yep,
not already, if but the Lego pass is going to be out for like quite a bit longer. I think it was like 80 days when it
10 weeks,
started.
I think, 10 more weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, 10 more weeks.
So if you still don't have time, if you didn't have time to get that, you could still get that like within the next couple of weeks. You'll be perfectly fine.
And you get
Um,
Chewy instantly, so there's no reason you'd have to grind to get the Lego pieces. So
yeah, yeah. With that being said, we do have a couple things to talk about. Two big things to talk about. Let's talk about Tales of the Empire for a little bit. Um,
do it.
so Tales of the Empire. A lot of people were disappointed in this thing, and I gotta say, if you were disappointed, that's on you. This was not supposed to be this game break, this like franchise breaking short series. I was not expecting it to be better than Tales of the Jedi because I just particularly didn't think the two characters that were portrayed like primarily were too interesting. By the way, am I the only one who didn't care where Borisovi's story went? Am I the only one who just didn't give a crap? Because like
Think
everybody was
so.
saying, everybody was saying, "Where's Barrett? Where's Barrett? Where is she?" No, we don't see her at all after. So what do we expect her story to be like? Anything big? Of course, like she did some pretty cool stuff after, but it ended up not being very effective in the long run. So I just didn't really care about it. And plus, uh, yeah, I did quite enjoy the Morgan Elsbeth arc in a couple scenarios. From for one,
Yeah,
I don't know if I mentioned this before on the pod, but I expected that arc to be an information filler, and that's exactly what it was. Um, we saw how the TIE Defender, the origin of the TIE Defender was her, which is a very cool fact. We originally thought it was just Thrawn, but that's actually
yeah,
why Thrawn like hired her within the Empire was because she was the originator of the TIE Defender, which is a really cool lore. I think that's pretty cool. And we also
yeah.
see
That was a
Corvus.
great piece. Yeah,
We also see Corvus and how the basically for the entire forest was just cut fire because something that I might have thought about when we first see the Mandalorian season 2 is why is this entire forest just like burned to shreds? And we see it. We basically
yeah.
see it's like pretty much a slave camp. Ideally, even though it's a labor camp, obviously, and yeah, but other than that, it wasn't really that much. The first episode was kind of useless, other than the fact that guys, there's another clan on Dathomir that we've never seen.
It's
So
Grievous. It's Grievous. It's
yeah,
Grievous.
seeing Grievous was
Yeah,
really cool in
silly.
the updated animation because we haven't seen
Yeah.
Grievous in a project since the Clone Wars season 5, I think it might have been. So yeah,
He was in like 2 seconds of the Bad Batch premiere, but like other than
yeah,
that, no.
yeah.
Um, just like a snapshot, just a picture of him, not even like anything cool.
If
So
they
yeah, this
if they
show,
want,
I will say, I
yeah.
was. Go ahead.
If they want to have another shorts idea, Grievous would definitely be a very popular target because that's another thing that people are
Absolutely.
demanding as a Grievous backstory, which I think that would be pretty cool too. I'd really like that. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I think the problem with this show is that it explained things that didn't need to be explained. I did like the lore tidbits. I loved getting the backstory on the TIE Defender. I love seeing what happens in that final episode with the forest burning and the New Republic, or rather the I'm forgetting his name, but the the dude calling Bo-Katan. I think that was pretty cool, tying it together, and I think it adds a lot of context to that Mandalorian episode where he liberates them. But
yeah,
other than but those are just small things in this 45-minute arc And I felt like the entire first episode was kind of useless. It's fun seeing Grievous, but there was no reason to do that first episode. It almost makes Morgan Elsbeth likable, and she's not likable in the other two episodes, so I don't know what the goal there was. Just a really useless thing to show. They just wanted to, I guess, show Grievous again and get people hyped with the trailers. But yeah, so Morgan Elsbeth, I wasn't expecting much from it, and it delivered about what I expected. So I'm not too disappointed. The Bear story, on the other hand, I think you are in the minority as to where you don't really care. But I'm curious. She goes into a prison cell, and she goes into prison, and we never hear of her again. And she was very pivotal for the Clone Wars and the fate of the saga. So I've been always been curious as to what happened to her. Do I think it needed to be explained? No. But am I happy God explained? Kind of. I think they really, really, really botched it. And I'd rather just had it not explained than the way they did it, to be honest. That first episode started out cool, but it was really basic. It was so predictable. It was nothing that surprised me or nothing that got me interested. Everything that happened in that episode was sort of like, oh yeah, sure, I'm just going with it. And I don't really care. I'm not invested in anything going on. Super shallow, super shallow. They clickbaited Vader. He walked through the door and sat down in a chair. And I was personally hoping that Vader, this would be an opportunity for Vader and Ventress to have some dialogue or something, some sort of conflict there, because that could have been something really cool. With, I'm sure Vader has some huge animosity towards her, and that could have made this story interesting in some way, but he's not even used. Does he even know who she is? We don't know. Second episode, she gets sort of a basic, oh, this is bad. I'm gonna be a good guy now story. And guess what? Inquisitors, as much as they want to kill the Jedi, they respect their pronouns, which makes me really, really happy. I'm really glad that she called that Jedi they and them and not a different pronoun, because if you're a Jedi killer who's hunting them down, as you're killing them, you gotta make sure you use them by their preferred pronouns. So that made me really, really happy that Star Wars is finally, getting woke. I'm so happy about that. So yeah, she has this basic kind of turning point, and she leaves. And then that third episode was decent, and it was basically just Fourth sister gets trapped in the labyrinth and then kills Barris. And I didn't really care because I didn't like how Barris's story went. So that was the arc for me. Cool to get some stuff on Fourth Sister, but she kind of basic, so I don't really care.
He kind of
Mid show.
basic.
Mid show.
Yeah.
The Fourth Sister is just like every other Inquisitor. She's like, oh, we're just gonna kill these people and then kill a Jedi. And there was like nothing. There was no point to giving her development because she's the same block, the same brick that she was earlier. So it doesn't even
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
that's my thoughts.
there's a Tales of the Empire post on from Star Wars on Instagram yesterday, and I think I saw 15. There were like 15 comments that said Tales of the They Them. I was like, I didn't even pay attention to that.
I know. I actually noticed it on my first viewing. I'm proud of myself. I'm turning into the annoying Instagram comments. Like all this woke Star Wars content, dude. It's ruining it. It's ruining my immersion. But no, that did actually make me laugh because I'm like, it felt so forced, and it was just funny that I thought it was funny personally. I don't ever get offended by the quote unquote woke stuff, which is such a stupid buzzword. But I don't care about that stuff as long as the
I mean,
story's good.
I
But
don't
the story
really,
wasn't good.
yeah. I don't really pay attention to these like quote woke agendas that they're doing. I mean, like
Yeah,
it's clear that Disney, like, of course, supports it. I mean, Marvel's been pushing it a hell of a ton, and I kind of think that's just kind of
yeah,
strange in a sense. Even though I don't, even though, okay, yeah, it's fine that you have it, but like if you're trying to make it super excessive and obvious, it's kind of like,
yeah.
you know. But
Yeah, I think if the story is good and decent, and if the scenes that it's in are fine, I don't care. But the fact that the show is just atrocious, I just had to lay into it. You know.
yeah, yeah. Morgan Elsbeth arc, I'd say, is like a 5.5 out of 10. I think the Barris arc is like a 4.5 out of 10. I mean, there's nothing great about it. Yeah,
I'm gonna say 3.5 for Barris, and I'm gonna say yeah 5.5 for Morgan.
yeah. Yeah, that's our Tales of the Empire talk. We really don't feel the need to talk anymore about it. That's just gonna be it for us. Let's talk about the thing that we would have talked about
Oof.
last week, but of course we couldn't record. The Bad Batch. We are finally saying goodbye to the show. Uh, this uh, this last episode was everything I could have ever wanted. A lot of predictions that we said on the last episode we got right, and a lot of them we got wrong. But that's what I really like about it. I would have preferred that over
Yeah.
being completely right about it and having it being predictable and or being like completely wrong about it. Being like,
Yeah.
oh,
There's nothing worse than a finale that you could have predicted everything that happens and it's super basic and by the books.
yeah,
I'm really happy that they did some things that we weren't expecting and it wasn't just this giant gore bath where everybody dies like Rogue One and it actually made sense story wise. But go ahead, you keep
yeah.
talking.
Yeah, so we're gonna be talking about the Bad Batch finale, and then we're gonna be celebrating the show by listing off our top 10 Bad Batch episodes after our main finale discussion. So the most obvious thing that happened, we're gonna say it together on go. Three, two, one, go. Hemlock died.
Everybody
Yeah,
survived. I don't know.
that was definitely not obvious, but I do think
Did
that's
I?
good that it was. But yeah,
Yeah.
uh,
I didn't
Hemlock's
think about
dead.
that. Yeah, I guess
Hemlock's dead. Everybody predicted that was gonna happen because like, how did Necromancer get delayed so long? It was because of
I
that.
never even thought about that. I never
Yeah,
even.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes
Nalus,
sense.
Nalase, I do think here's a couple plot points that I did think they super well. I think Filoni did Nalase and Rampart really well in the finale. I think they
Hmm.
were pretty good because Rampart being the little sneaky snake that he is trying to find any like leverage that he can because he knows he's not in a position where he can
Yeah.
bargain for anything unless he gains something valuable. Uh, the interaction with him and Nalase is really cool because it goes back to like the very beginning of the show where like Rampart basically took
Hmm.
everything from Nalase and then she kind of just has this vengeance even though she knows she's not going to survive after this encounter, but she can at least, put her make her work die with her. I think that was a really cool scenario.
Yeah.
And Rampart getting blown up I think was really funny. um so
That is. I love. I wish we could have heard him scream one more time.
yeah,
Because that's always fun. But yeah, yeah. Be- I love that scene. I think that was a cool way to explain all the data going away. Um, Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Yeah. So for the finale, for me, I loved it as an ending to the Bad Batch squad. But for the initial viewing, I did feel a little not let down, but I don't know how to explain it. I think there was a bit more that could have been tapped into, but I'm glad it wasn't because I think the final product was better without it. But there's a lot of loose ends in terms of Rex, how Wolf, Gregor, and Rex are the only ones left in in Rebels. And I don't think it's gonna happen, but I wish there's some sort of continuation of this, maybe a Rex and Echo show or something like that, the Good Batch,
yeah,
and they run around and they liberate clones or something. And I hope that happens. I don't know if it will, but I felt like there were a lot of questions that did go unanswered. That's my only gripe with this is that they spent a lot of time just trying to get a good finale for our main characters. That I feel like some of the smaller plot lines kind of got lost in it.
mm-hmm.
Um, mainly the stuff with Rex. I really wanted to see because Wolf showed up earlier in the season, and I wanted to see something happen with that. We didn't get it, and if it's not set up for a different show, I think it's going to be really disappointing. But as for the Bad Batch says, on the Bad Batch side of things, I think this was a phenomenal episode. Um, Crosshair locked in. Um, that final scene where out in the rain with Hemlock and Omega, and then Hunter and Crosshair was great. I loved that we got a little peaceful, happy ending where they're done fighting. Omega grows up and goes to the rebellion, all that good stuff, and
Yeah.
yeah, I mean this episode was action packed as well. I love that scene where Omega she does the "We have a Hulk" line, and then Wrecker busts through and just starts throwing hands. That was fire. Um, that whole fight scene where they and like where Echo and Omega they rally the clones. It's great. It's a great little substitute. It's not quite the clone rebellion I thought we were gonna have, but I'm completely fine with it. Like I said, I wouldn't have liked anything that happened to be predictable necessarily. Um, so that's just the Ryan Johnson in me. You know, I want to subvert my expectations. So yeah, it was a good episode. I enjoyed it. Decent runtime. It didn't. The pacing was very good. Um, and my boy Echo finally in the spotlight again. Arc Trooper Echo was going crazy this episode. So yeah,
Yeah.
great episode.
Yeah. A couple more of my favorite things. We did not, of course, as you mentioned, we did not see Rex, Gregor, uh, Wolf, or Hauser in this episode. Very surprising, as they were the like original. Rex was like the original guy that wanted to find Tantus in the first place, while the Batch were kind of reluctant
Yeah.
to do so. That is until, of course, Omega was there. Um, but the good thing about them not coming up is I do believe it could have taken away from the Batch's sort of resolution in a sense of having
Absolutely.
them focus,
Absolutely.
because there would be no question that they would be like sort of the driving leading force when we know that there's this squad that has like this unpenetrable success rate during the war. So like it's it just goes to show that the focus wants to be on them rather than the others, because Rex, with all due respect, even though we'd like to see more of him, he we had another entire 7 season long show where he was the main clone trooper of that
Hmm.
show, and we saw a lot of him. So
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. And then another thing, I do really enjoy that CX2 ended up being just a thing, or like just a clone operative that like didn't really have an
Yes.
identity. Dave Filoni has known to
Yes.
do this to make us get our hopes up and having it just be for nothing. The most recent example being with Marok in Ahsoka, where everybody, even though I
You
wasn't
gotta
really
love and
expecting
hate him,
anything,
man.
even though I wasn't expecting everything from that character, everybody was saying how he's like some this notable Force user that we know, even though he ended up being just like Night Sister magic, I guess. CX2 was the same thing, even though I do think it was strange that he got so much focus.
Hmm.
It was what Dave Filoni was planning all along for that, and how he wanted to get our
Yeah.
hopes up for that. Yep.
I think it was very weird that they gave him so many lines and like a unique sort of accent behind the what do you call it, the distortion of his mask, um, and just a lot of scenes for it to be nothing. But I'm glad it was nothing because I was scared it was going to be Cody or Tech, and that would have been sad. Um, it is crazy how desperate we have gotten as a group that we're so weakened and out of our comfort zone. They're out here just killing clones, which is crazy. Just straight up killing them. And some of these deaths were brutal, man. And with the actual
Yep.
I don't know what you call the group of the, I guess I'll just call them the CX clones, even though that's not their numbers. But that group of special clones, they were brutal, man. That was pretty awesome seeing that fight. Very few of the prisoners survived that, and yeah, it was just it's very awesome fight scenes. Getting a group that's an equal to the Bad Batch. And that initial fight scene where Crosshair loses his hand, that was phenomenal, man. Man, he was trying so hard. His like Wrecker and Hunter were selling the bag, bro, and he was locked in, but he couldn't do it by himself.
Well,
They were
Wrecker
just they sold.
Wrecker made sense because he was injured from the beginning.
Yeah, Wrecker was like cooked. Like his whole like chest plate was cooked. He was cooked. But like Hunter didn't help very much at all either. And Crosshair was kind of on his own. And yeah, I don't know why it was. I find it funny that the clone chose to cut off his hand. Like he didn't have to do that. He could have just knocked him out or like killed him. He like just cut off his hand for fun or something, which
Yeah.
is kind of funny. Um,
Another
but
thing
he's
I
still locked
liked,
in with his
yeah,
left hand.
yeah. Another thing I liked, Wrecker didn't get injured because, he just flat out got like beat. He got injured because he's not necessarily smart in the head, which has been like
Yeah.
known like from the beginning since Clone Wars season 7. Even though
Yeah.
even though it does
He's
kind
gotten
of
smarter.
yeah, even though it doesn't really seem like a good fit for the finale of the series, it is a it is sort of a good sign. It's like Wrecker, you gotta lock in. You can't be you can't be a dumbass. But yeah,
Yeah. He did lock in. He overcame it when they once they were captured. Um yeah, they really nerfed him. They had to obviously, but yeah, I didn't realize the episode before that the hit from that animal was so strong. Like I didn't realize that was having him like yeah, he was stumbling after that for sure.
but he was still gonna like he bashed one of those clone
He was still
operatives
taking
like straight
names.
into the wall. That scene was crazy,
Yeah.
even though
It
he's
was
like
that adrenaline rush, bro. He was going crazy.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
phenomenal.
yeah. And then Echo, I think, was the highlight of the squad in this episode. So
Yeah.
like people that are like new to the Bad Batch never really knew like from the Clone Wars and whatnot. Like
He's
this man
him.
don't like this man may seem like he's handicapped because he's only got one like real arm, but this man was an ARC trooper. I mean, he was a formidable foe. He
Yeah.
was a primary cause for the defensive Camino back in season 3 of the Clone Wars. That where he actually got
And
the results.
he's willing to do anything to get the mission done as well. He jumped into an exploding ship to yeah
Yeah.
um for the greater good. And yeah, he's such a badass in this episode, man. And he gets out another hand too, which is great. I hope he keeps that and he can kind of switch it. Um it is
Yeah.
tragic that his armor is still on that ship on Tantus, so
Yeah,
he's
he
gonna
did
have to
lose
wear
his armor.
stormtrooper armor from now on. But it works better for missions, I guess. Better recon, so
Yeah.
sure. Bad visibility though, apparently. Um, but hey,
Another point we gotta point out, the Zillow Beast. Uh, Pretty much everything
yeah,
that we expected it to be. Basically the driving force at the beginning of the episode, and then it just kind of went out. Even though we don't know if they ended up, because they ended up sending shuttles after the beast. We don't know if they ended up detaining it. Odds are not likely, which is a big reason why they were able to infiltrate. But yeah, I do think that was a great little point because at that point, and that scene where Echo's like, "Omega released the Zillow," because that's the exact thing I would do. That's pretty cool. I
uh,
really enjoyed that. Um, but yeah, any other thoughts?
absolutely.
Any other thoughts about the finale that you gotta give?
Um, Not much. It was great. It's not in. I'm gonna give a little spoiler. It's not in my top five. It is in my top 10. It's not on my top five, but it was a good finale. I don't think it beats that season one finale because that was just phenomenal. That was something else. But this was a great way to end it, and it was really bittersweet. And I enjoyed it for sure.
Yeah,
Not a great show, but a good show, and a show that I will definitely be rewatching, and I'm gonna look forward to it for sure.
yeah. Uh, just recapping the entire show. The only thing that I didn't like of the show, though it wouldn't necessarily make it better in a sense. We never got to see the OG5 reunite since the
Yeah,
season 1 finale. Throughout season 2, one of the big gripes I had about it was that Crosshair and the other batch members never interacted. Like, they just never saw each other that
yeah,
entire season. And I thought that kind of messed with us because like they see each other in season 3, episode 4, and then they just don't. Uh, they we kind of just it was after
You jump right into it.
the entire catastrophe on Camino, which is like probably either that or Iriadu, the rail car incident, was like the most fateful like sort of scenario that they've ever been in because they were about to like die with like the thing that made him. So, but that was my only sort of critique. I would have
For
definitely
sure.
loved to see that happen, even though
Even
if
though
it had
Tech's
to do
dead.
with a tech resurrection, even though I don't think that would necessarily be great. But yeah, that's all I had to say about
For
that.
sure. That's part of the tragedy, man. Clone Force 99.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
good
So with
show.
that being said, let's
I
get
have some
into a
honorable
yeah.
mentions.
Let's with that being said, let's get into a new section of Ramblers Radio. Let's go into Smokescreen. This section of the show, I'm gonna rant about something that might have just pissed me the heck off within the last week. Uh, and it's
Okay.
gonna make for some content. Code might laugh, he might cry. I bet he better not cry, but let's see how it is. So this past week, on my cruise ship, I competed in a couple rounds of Star Wars trivia. I did a basic one and I did two advanced ones. I ended up winning an advanced one. W to me. W to me.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
but here's my gripe. On this basic one, this lady said you can use Wi-Fi if you have it. What do you mean? What do you mean what? So you're just telling me this isn't just like a
You just
test
look
of
up
knowledge.
answers.
This is just a test of fingers on a keyboard. You're telling me that? Like, what do you mean? I literally lost this because
Oh
I did not
God.
have access to Wi-Fi because it was $100. I'm not paying $100 for Wi-Fi when I'm on a cruise ship. All right, and
It's
then
pay to win. It's pay to win. Oh my God.
yeah, literally Battlefront 2
Uh,
2017. Trust. Uh, and then I ended up losing. I got 18 out of 20. I ended up losing because I forgot the abbreviation of TIE and TIE Fighter and AT-AT.
Dude,
Those
you
two I
still cooked.
missed.
18 out of 20. You still cooked.
Those two I
All
missed.
terrain troop transport, bro.
And all terrain armor transport and twin ion engine were the ones that I missed. Somebody got 19 out of
I
20
don't
ahead
know
of
the
me.
Taiwan.
Somebody got
Damn.
19 out of 20 and they beat me. And I was so sad, man. I was so sad. I ended up
Dude.
yeah.
Dude. That's.
Yeah. Pay to win, bro. Pay to win. They were saying that you can buy the Wi-Fi package, but do not buy it during the game. I was like, why even buy it at all? Why even let us use it, you know? Um
For
so
real.
I
That
ended
is
up
not. Because they knew not enough people were going to know the answers, bro.
yeah. So so I ended up losing to Wi-Fi Warriors, of course. Yeah, zero ping, nada nada. But then I ended up next day. I went to 1045 Star Wars Trivia Advanced, and I won that with 17 out of 20 points. I ended up winning a fire hat, and a lot of other things that don't really have anything to do with Star Wars, but it was a win is a win. And then I plugged Ramblers Radio. Shout outs to Reese. I hope you're watching this episode when we record it.
Let's
When we have it uploaded.
go.
He's the
Let's
biggest
go,
Star Wars fan that I've
Reese.
ever met. He has like I'm pretty sure he has like every single Galaxy's Edge lightsaber plus Jedi and Sith robes. Uh,
Let's
so,
go,
so
Reese.
some of the questions he was asking was corny as heck though. One of them was what was the
Uh,
name of the bartender in Moss Isley in A New Hope? How do you expect me to know that, brother?
that's so cooked, bro. I've definitely heard the name, but I'm not going to remember that, bro. Like,
Yeah,
the bartender?
yeah.
That's cooked.
It's probably some from some comic book that was released in the 2010s, but oh well, it is what it is. That's the that's the only thing that I had. And then the only other thing, why is everybody so disappointed in Tales of the Empire? It was nothing to be very highly expected about. You shouldn't have had high expectations for this short series. It was six shorts with like an hour and a half long length based on two characters that aren't particularly interesting. So why have such high expectations? Just because Vader
Here,
was in the final shot of a TV spot doesn't mean he's going to be a big factor in the show. It's just not. It just isn't what it is. Even though it was like that in Rogue One, even though he was a much bigger factor in Rogue One, he wasn't that big of a factor. He had like a really cool scene, one of the top 10 scenes in Star Wars history. But other than that, he wasn't all that. He talked to director Krennic. He said some corny dad joke that nobody cares about and everybody thinks should be removed from the dialogue of the film. Be careful not to choke on your aspirations if you don't know what I'm talking about. But yeah, what do you think about that? I know we briefly talked about it, so I don't
Yeah,
have to say
so
much. But
yeah, I know. I mean, the reason why I was excited for this show personally was because Tales of the Jedi was so good. And I actually, I mean, I know you didn't really care, but I wanted to see where the bear story went. And I had trust in the show writers, which I shouldn't have had, but I did, that they were going to deliver a decent product because Star Wars animation is usually good. Unlike the live action, sometimes the animation is usually good. So I was pleasantly looking forward to it. It was a few days after the Bad Batch finale, so I was like, "Hey, some more Star Wars. I'm down for this." And that's personally why I was a little bit disappointed. I didn't think it was gonna be a knock out of the park, but I was hoping for at least some cool little decent tidbits of Star Wars.
just because they saw Vader and Thrawn and Grand Inquisitor, they thought it was going to be all that. But we move.
Yeah,
Well, the thing about that, Tales of the Jedi had two characters that we were genuinely interested in with their backstories. We added backstory to Ahsoka that was
yeah,
relevant to how she survived Order 66, and then we added backstory for Dooku that was vital to know how he turned to the
it was
Separatists.
very needed,
Those
very
were needed to
needed.
happen. These sort of stories, even though I did kind of enjoy Morgan's backstories to an extent, they didn't really need to happen. I would have lived perfectly fine without him. And I'm also pissed that this
Yeah,
was
we
the
did
May the 4th
not.
celebration because we deserve something better.
Yeah, we did not need to know that Morgan Elsbeth is a bad guy who's a tyrant and a dictator to these people. We know that already. Like, oh, thank you for telling me the forest is burnt. I saw that in the show, but I mean it's cool to see, but it wasn't that shouldn't have been the highlight of the arc. That should not have been one of the highlights that the forest burnt down. So yeah, very disappointing.
The only
Very
yeah,
very useless.
the only thing I found genuinely interesting of the show was that we found out how Morgan Elsbeth became connected to Thrawn, which is important for the backstory of the
Yeah.
Ahsoka series and Mandalorian season 2, I
I
guess.
did like that. I like that, and I like that she's behind the tie defender because I think that's just a cool thing to tie in. Like, why not? Um,
Yeah.
and I like that they're in talks, but I don't think that it was worth it to watch the 45 minutes. Just yeah, pass on this one. Trust
Yeah.
us.
But anyway, that's going to be the end of Smoke Screen. Let's finish out our main segment. All right.
I have
Let's
some
list off
honorable mentions.
let's
I
list
don't know
off
if
our
you
top
have
10
any.
Bad Batch episodes. Yep. Let's I have a couple.
All right.
The only ones that I wrote down for honorable mentions were Battle Scars Reunion and Truth and Consequences. They were very worthy of being on the
Really?
list, but I just kind of a couple episodes kind of just edged out for me. Um, well,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for me, I have three honorable mentions. I have number one. This might surprise some of you guys. But I have decommissioned. I enjoyed that episode with the sisters. Yeah, decommissioned. Is there an echo in here? Goofy joke. One more. I have War Mantle. Was a great episode. We got to see Gregor a little bit. Um, that was cool. And then this third one, I know you might have it in your top 10, but for me, my third one is Camino Lost. This the second episode of the two-part finale.
yeah, yeah. Let's get into the top 10. We're going to go one at a time, spend like a couple minutes talking about each of them. Unless the others already talked about it, then maybe just had add a little brief points that the other didn't do. My first one, number 10, I have The Return, which is season 3, episode 5. The main highlight of this episode is that Crosshair is finally reunited with the Batch and has rejoined. He gets his old armor back, which I think has the coolest design out of all the five. I think his
Yeah.
armor is just really cool. And the real highlight of this episode was the tension that Hunter and Crosshair have, and that they're forced to work together like old times in order to escape a dire situation, which was the whatever the worm thing was that was trying to attack them. I think that was really cool. And then
Mhm.
seeing Crosshair seeing Crosshair sort of reflect on this planet that basically altered his way of thinking, even though the Batch doesn't even know that this is where he had his altered state of mind. When
Yeah.
regarding the Empire, they don't even know that about that. It's sort of like a dramatic irony thing. Stacking the helmets with Mayday and his squad. Of course, another thing. This episode just has like quite a few just great moments that I think make it worthy of putting it up here.
Yeah, absolutely. That one is a tad bit higher on my list. So coming up number 10 for me, I have which episode is that? Season 3, episode 7, Extraction. I enjoyed this episode a lot. It's not quite as hardy as some of the other episodes, but I think it has some great moments. Again, with that CX clone, we get the conflict to Crosshair and Hauser resolved. We get stuff with Wolf, which was great setup for things that never got paid off, unfortunately. But I think this episode just had some really good heart to it, and it was definitely a satisfying second part to a two-parter.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, mine nine. I have Shadows of Tantus, season 3, episode 3. Highlights: first time that Omega and Crosshair work together. They just work so well despite never working together ever before. It's just kind of their nature of being sort of intuitive and sort of altered clones, how they're able to just plan. Because, like, Crosshair and Omega know all the plans, even though they never work together. And even though Crosshair is defective with the hand tremor, and whatnot, them be able to come up with plans on the fly and whatnot. And then the second highlight is, of course, the start of Project Necromancer, the reveal that's like the main like sort of thing, the main opposition in this season. Uh, a lot of people shouts to Star Wars Theory thought that that was just not necessary, that they would just get rid of it. But it is canon. We do need to find out like the origins, and I do like that Project Necromancer is an idea that started at the very beginning of the Empire, because it's not something where Palpatine's like, "Oh no, I sense conflict in Vader. Let me clone myself real quick." No, like it takes time to sort of get
Yeah.
this thing going, and he needs the right personnel for it as well. Um, but yeah, I do like those are the big two reasons why I think this episode remains so high.
But yeah, my number 9 is, believe it or not, Season 3, Episode 15, The Cavalry Has Arrived. So, this is the Season 3 finale. Um, and I know this might be a little higher for you, it might not even be on your list. But for me, I think this deserves top 10. But I think there are some episodes that just offer some way better things. There's nothing wrong with this episode. I think other episodes just offer a lot more. This is sort of the thing. I like to call it like the Avengers Endgame effect. Endgame is not the greatest MCU movie, but it is a hell of a good finale, and it ties everything off beautifully. But most of us don't put it as our number one movie, but it's up there for sure. And it's to no fault of this episode. I just think it falls a bit lower than the others. Phenomenal episode, though. We already talked about it for full length earlier, so we're gonna move on.
Yep. My next one is the Solitary Clone, season 2, episode
Wow.
3. This is the start of Crosshair seeing how he's just not worth much in the Empire, uh, being stuck on Camino for however long he said, and then returning to Rampart back for duty because that's just kind of his way of thinking. He just goes back to work despite the working conditions. And then Cody sort of has the same sort of swaying thoughts, except his thoughts, of course, generate a lot faster. because Crosshair is sort of the just direct sort of like meager way of thinking, while Cody has a more
Are you
altered
dagging
style.
Gara?
Uh, while Cody did, of course, serve under a Jedi. Therefore, despite having an inhibitor chip, he can also possess a Jedi's way of thinking. When he can see that the Empire has changed and he doesn't really see the thing that he served before. Those are the highlights for me. The I think the main highlight was the final scene that we see Cody in, where he's like, "Tell me something. In this new empire, are we making the galaxy better?" And then he reflects by saying, we make our own choices rather compared to droids, but we also have to live with our choices." That was directly referring to Revenge of the
Yeah.
Sith and his fateful decision to kill Obi-Wan, even though, of course, we know it didn't happen. Um, yeah, those are just the highlights for me. Him negotiating with Separatist leader, who I don't remember the name. She was only in one episode. Um, the negotiation was a really cool scene because he, of course, was under
Hmm.
the negotiator himself, so that was a nice touch.
True,
But yeah,
true, true. Never
yeah,
thought about that.
yeah.
Yeah,
Those are the
yeah.
couple
That's
highlights.
it's a
Yeah.
phenomenal episode for sure. My number 8 is The Shadow of Tantus, or Shadows of Tantus, rather. Season 3, Episode 3. You talked about this to a little bit of a length. This is a phenomenal episode. Um, it shows Crosshair and Omega's escape, of course. I think there's some great dialogue moments in here. I think there's some great character moments. I particularly love the part um, where a Crosshair asks her if she knows whatever plan or whatever, and she says, "Yeah, Tech taught me it," and then of course he did. Great scene, great scene. And I think this episode just had a lot of heart, a lot going for it. It was built up to really well, which I think helped. I think a lot of people would rate this a bit higher, but I think that's just due to the anticipation to this episode. It's still a great episode, but I don't know if it stacks up to some of the other ones in this show for sure. But yeah, Shadows of Tantus.
Yep. 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 My number 7. I have said not great things about this episode in the past, but I've had a change of perspective. It's Plan 99.
Okay,
Plan 99 is
okay.
my number 7. Uh, my original gripes of this episode were just because I don't think this was a great way to end a season and then having us wait an entire year for the next one. But having season 3 now, of course, changes my perspective because we're not left on any cliffhangers of any sort. Um, even though that doesn't really seem fair to say, that's just kind of how it really works. The tech sacrifice, of course, was original suspense because you're just thinking he's hanging so low. He's not actually gonna die, is he? And then the moment sort of
Yeah.
gradually goes in. He's like, okay, this is really gonna happen, and then he just goes down under. And then the Sid betrayal is something that everybody saw coming from the original pod racing episode. Was when Sid's like sort of rival client, whatever it was, saying, "Don't trust Sid. She's gonna backstab you." And yeah, even though the batch don't really listen very
She's
well.
only out for herself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they had to go to Ord Mantell because that's where AZ was, and they needed a med droid. So yeah, unfortunate circumstances for that. Um, but yeah, I do really like. There are very many, even though I do think this episode sort of looks better when it's paired with the previous episode. Uh, of course, we're not rating 2 episodes at a time. We're not combining 2 episodes for one. We're just doing one at a time. So yeah, Planet 99 is my 7.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm surprised because I know you've been an avid season 2 finale hater for a long time. I don't exactly agree with that take. I think it was decent. I don't think it lives up to season 1 or season 3. But I think it really put the Bad Batch in a spot of desperation and in a spot of tragedy, and I think it was a great setup for season 3. That being said, it's the middle finale, so there's not too much to be done, to be honest. So my number 7 is The Return, which you talked about, season 3, episode 5. You talked about this, mostly everything I want to say. I think there's some phenomenal, um, some great. I keep saying phenomenal today. Some great dialogue in this. I think that argument in outside before the big worm comes with Hunter and Crosshair is really really good. And how Hunter sort of gets caught out on his BS. And but Crosshair's not perfect either. But I think that was really cool, and they had to work together and sort of bond back again. I also love the scene where Crosshair is picking up the helmets, which I think was really great. Mayday, rest in peace. Took one for the team. Um, yeah, you talked about it mostly. This is a great episode. Everyone's kind of back together. It's a happy episode for sure. Despite its sad moments, I think it's one that I remember fondly.
Yeah, yeah. Moving on to number 6, I have Extraction. Extraction, an episode that you had a little lower, I believe. Um,
And
yeah. This the highlight of this episode, which I think is a top 5 moment in the series, was the standoff with Rex and Wolf. I think that moment is
yeah,
like 10 out of 10. Recalling the season 7 finale, and then having Wolf, even though Wolf does seem like a clone, that because when we see from Rebels, he actually reports the Ghost Crew to the Empire because he's like very by the book.
it does.
He's not a very intuitive sort of independent mind. He's like very friendly to authority. It's
Yeah,
of course obvious to see how he's with the Empire. It's really good to see him in the show because I think he was needed. And that standoff where sort of Rex basically alters his way of thinking, basically starts him on the path that Cody was on and Crosshair was on. Um, I think it's just a really
yeah,
cool moment. And then seeing the Crosshair and Hauser sort of conflict being the resolution from the previous episode, Infiltration. This was not a thing that I was expecting to see in the show, but it's of course I think is a I think it's a concept that definitely was needed in a
yeah,
sense, because I do think it offers a very cool perspective in that sense. Yeah, I really enjoyed this episode for
yeah.
sure. Yep.
Yeah. I think that Rex Wolf standoff. I think it's just a little soured for me, just because we don't get a resolution to that in this show, and if we do, Extraction is definitely gonna jump up in my list. So coming in at number 6 for me, I have Aftermath, season 1, episode 1. This the first thing going for this episode, it's an hour long, man. That is just great. Any episode that's an hour long, it's pretty great, except for that season 3 Coruscant episode of The Mandalorian. We don't talk about that one. Um, this
Random story.
episode is the space lollipop, yeah. So yeah, this episode has just so many great things. The batch is together. This is the Bad Batch from season 7, essentially. This is a season 1 episode, so they still have their old painted armor. And we get to see them take out some droids one last time, which is pretty sick. There's an argument out there that the Bad Batch were like nerfed in this show, and this episode kind of proves that they aren't. It's just that droids are predictable and they're so much easier to take down that the Bad Batch is, of course, going to look a lot stronger taking on battle droids than they are actual people. So, and that's what they are programmed for. That's what they are created for. We get to see them do that. The Order 66 stuff is great in this episode with Caleb Dune. I think that's really great. I love that we got that explained a little bit, and it explains his. I mean, obviously, we didn't need the background that he's distrustful in clones, because obviously, Order 66, his master got killed. But I think it adds a little bit just having the Bad Batch being there. And we see Crosshair following the order immediately. Well, not immediately, but being less hesitant than the others for sure. And in this episode, we get a lot of conflict between Hunter and Crosshair. Crosshair thinking that Hunter is not fit to lead and that he can't make the tough decisions to keep the squad going. And by the end of this episode, they leave Crosshair behind. Who knows if his inhibitor trip is out at this point? Probably not. Um, but it's a tragic thing that they have to leave him behind, and he definitely holds this against them for a long time. He this is one of his major motivations for not wanting to go back to them, is that they, in his eyes, they abandoned him. We get our introduction to Omega, which she's not so great in this episode. I think she's not annoying, but just a little much. But her character gets developed. Season one Omega is kind of not the greatest character because she doesn't get much development as she does later. She's more helpless for sure, and she's sort of just a damsel in distress. But yeah, great episode. An hour long. We get to see how the Bad Batch sort of gets phased from season 7 to how we're gonna be in this show, and I think it was a great transition for sure.
Yep. My number 5 is Camino Lost. The highlight of this episode. Okay, so I want you to imagine yourself on Topoka City when it's sinking to the ocean floor. How terrified would you be? You're probably not gonna get out alive in this situation, my brother. So imagine that the the batch are very argumentative with Crosshair because they are confused of his motives, even though he makes it clear that he wants them to join the Empire. But then they must put all that lollygagging aside and escape this like terror, which is like the most fear, which is like the scariest thing that some people can probably even think of as being sunken alive in a sunken building. Um, Even though I do think that some of the things were a bit silly, like escaping in the tube pods, I think that was kind of strange, but
Yeah.
it's not important enough for me to sort of deduct it in a huge way. Like if that's their only means of escape, then that kind of just is because like there's no ships there or anything because it's all decommissioned and whatnot. So they got to do. It goes to show that in the time of the Empire, they have to take any means necessary for their survival. And that kind of is just exemplified in the greatest fashion in this one. And seeing Omega take the lead in terms of navigating the city, even though it's sunken, I do think that's great development for her. And her trying to save Crosshair, I think, is really cool. And yeah, those are the highlights for me. I just really enjoyed this one.
Yeah, that one I'm so sad that that didn't make my list. It's in my honorable mentions. But it's a killer, man. I personally think the first part of the finale is a little stronger for me. But it's a great way to end it. It definitely solidified the finale as the best part of the show. Up to that point. Um, so I believe we're on number 5, right? My number 5 is the solitary clone. So a little bit higher than you. You already talked about this a little bit. I love the internal conflict with Cody and Crosshair this episode. I think Crosshair gets a really cool moment when they're initially infiltrating, where he's doing his cool sniper stuff, which you always love to see. I love when Crosshair actually is good. As much as I love, like seeing him having to overcome his mental block. It's cool when he actually gets to hit his shots, because there were a few times in season 1 specifically where this is before he got blinded, before he like his hand was shaky. He was just missing shots for some reason, just for no reason. So I'm glad, this episode he's hitting his shots for sure. We get to see some droidicas this episode. So the action was really great, but definitely the main highlight was that in that negotiation scene towards the end, and then that both initial conversation between Cody and Crosshair and the final one at the end. I think all of that dialogue it was so great. And it starts to plant that seed of clones who are waking up and realizing. And that's another thing. Truth and Consequences is not on my list, but I kind of wish it was. That's also
It's
another
a
great episode
it's in
where
my
we
honorable
learn
mention as well.
more. Yeah, it's a great episode where we learn more about clones. But yeah, solitary clone. It barely cracks my top 5. It is just it's perfect. Great episode.
Yep. All right. My number four is Return to Camino. It's the first half of the season one finale. Return of the Camino. This is the only time that we see the entirety of the Bad Batch fight together post premiere. Um, and we see it's basically a part two of the premiere where they're fighting the sort of dark. I don't even know if it's they're DT Sentry droids. They're not dark troopers, but yeah,
Yeah, DT
fighting
Century droids.
those, and they're not nerfed this time. They don't have to just use training blasters. They use their real blasters, and they don't have to, even though they don't have to use their intuitive strategies. Uh, it just shows that they're an absolute unit, and the conflict that Wrecker and Hunter, not Wrecker, that Crosshair and Hunter have in that scene, I think is like, even though I do think it's great in the return, I think this conflict that they have in this episode was like 10 times better. Like the Crosshair quote goes, if I wanted you dead, you would be. Not that I want to be justified. You betrayed everything you stood for, and for what? The Republic. The dialogue in this episode is just next level. Um, it, to a point where I think it's the best dialogue that we've seen in the show. Period. Uh, yeah, and
Absolutely.
yeah, just that being said, and the farewell to Camino, I think is warranted, even though so many people wanted to see the Clone Rebellion on Camino, like in Legends. I also just don't think it quite makes sense because the Empire controls the clones, and then the Kaminoans don't really have much military defense outside of the clones. So I
Yeah.
just think this plot line makes more sense in that case. I This episode just has way too many high points for it to not be top five.
Yeah, absolutely. So my number 4 is Point of No Return, season 3, episode 11, I believe. Point of No Return. Oh man, did this get me hyped for the rest of the show? This episode is so good, man. And this episode was great because we got to watch it like at a decent hour too. We didn't have to wake up at like 5 a.m. and watch it. That was really great. Um, so,
How's that giving you
Point of No
bonus
Return.
points? That's so
Cause my
goofy.
brain was more active. No,
Because
but
you're
this episode
14,
was
Lucas.
phenomenal. I'm not 14, okay? Um, so Point of No Return. This episode, a lot of great stuff. I loved just the tragedy of it, and how helpless everything is. Hunter, they all split up to try to remedy the situation. Wrecker's out. He was near the blast. We lose the Marauder in this episode. I forgot to say that. That is tragic. So he gets knocked out from the blast. He says Gonki, knocked out from the blast. Um, and then after that, Hunter goes to try to get a transport, and Crosshair and Omega kind of sit there, and they have this very heartfelt dialogue where the script is kind of flipped. And whereas earlier in the season, Crosshair is telling her to leave without him and um, to go, and now he's actually vouching for her to stay, and while she is trying to turn herself in, and that is exactly what she ends up doing. um, but it's cool to see the development between these two characters and how Crosshair has changed. um, and when she turns herself in, the plan is he shoots a tracker on the ship. He doesn't lock in. It's a little too early for him to lock in. He like completely chokes the shot, which is just tragic because it leaves us at the end of the episode just feeling so hopeless. Like, where do we even go from here? Like, we've lost all our leverage. We've lost everything. We're back to square one. Like, she's back there. We can't track her. Nothing. Um, so unfortunately, I think it gets explained a little too quickly in the next episode. But I think this episode leaves off in such a good note where it feels so hopeless, much like the season 2 finale. It feels very hopeless. And it's a great piece. It's a great piece in this show. and it quite literally is the point of no return. So I just love the episode, man.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and just throw that episode in my honorable mentions. The only thing that I kind of just didn't really enjoy much about, I just kind of think it was way too predictable. I knew Omega was just gonna get captured, like we knew it was gonna happen. But I do like her sort
Yeah,
of decision. I think it's a really good one. Um, my number three is Aftermath. This episode set up the Bad Batch like pretty much perfectly in my eyes. I know your one gripe is that Omega isn't the greatest character in the show, or not in the show, but in this sort of
season.
season or in this premiere.
Yeah,
But like, we see this in literally every Star Wars project. Like we saw it with Luke
yeah,
Skywalker in A New Hope, Ahsoka, Ezra, Anakin
yeah.
in The Phantom Menace. It happens everywhere. Like what? And
Absolutely.
everybody's complaining on Twitter, typing their thumbs like, "Why are you guys not used to this? Like this is Star Wars. It's
Yeah, they
supposed
should
to
know
be
by
about
now.
growth and development, and this is the easiest way to portray it, and it's also in most ways the best way to portray it." Because Omega is this clone that's lived
Absolutely.
on this cloning facility this entire life, doesn't even know what grass is, has never touched grass in her life. She's no Fortnite kid, but she
Yeah.
has never touched grass in her life. And this
So she's gonna be very socially awkward, obviously.
and she gets attached to the batch because, like her, they're just different from everybody else. All the clones,
Mm.
especially after Order 66, are the same. The Bad Batch are not the same, and neither is she. So that's how she naturally gets attached. This is how friend groups work. You find similarities in each other because the rest just don't really seem to be like you. It's how friendships works and how relationship works. I'm dealing with college. I'm in the trench. Well, I'm not in the trenches yet right now, but I was in the trenches not too long ago. I was dealing with the stuff. But it's okay. We're past it now. We got to deal with it again in a few months, but that's okay. Going on a bit of a rambling tangent there, but yeah. The exposition with Order 66 is as predictable as it was great. Seeing Kanan, Caleb Doom was just such a cool add-on that we didn't really need, but it was just
Mhm.
so cool to see. Um, Hearing Freddie Prinze Jr.'s voice for Caleb Doom was kind of weird. Like
Uh,
a
that was
grown
so
man,
bad.
a grown man with a a child with a grown man's voice. You know, he hit puberty a little too early. But
Oh, it
yeah,
was so bad.
yeah,
That I forgot about that. That was really really jarring because it just sounded like season 4 Kanan.
yeah.
Um,
Shout outs to
super
Freddie.
super
Yeah,
weird.
shout outs to
Um,
Freddie Prinze Jr.
he
Though.
did
Come
this
come on the podcast.
for real. He did this weird attempt to like try to like make his voice higher, and it sounded so bad. It was really bad. But yeah, I talked about that episode a little bit before. Great episode. Something I didn't mention that I do want to add to it though is I love how they transitioned the batch from like how they were from season 7 to now, because they are not vastly different, but they are different characters in this show for sure. If you go back and watch that season 7 arc, they're very different. In that they're almost like edgy teenagers that like think they're all
Yeah,
cool, and they like sit on Twitter all day, and they're degenerates, and they're like that arc is very, a lot of the scenes with the Bad Batch are like written for like a 12-year-old kid, and it's super over the top, and they're not really characters, they're just like traits, like Wrecker, strong, Tex,
yeah,
smart, and like and in a lot of the scenes they're just super over the top, but they sort of get transitioned into actual characters here. Anyways, that's way off task, but that's my thoughts. I had that one at number 6. So
yeah,
my number 3, which you had in your honorable mentions actually, is Reunion, season 1, episode 8. So this one does beat out the previous episode of Battle Scars, I think it's called, the previous episode. For me, I love that episode too. Or I don't want to get into that. So the reunion, this episode picks up right off where episode 7 left, and this episode sort of like a very personal pick. I don't think this is personally better than a lot of these. But man, my viewing experience watching this for the first time, man, it was so great. I was this was still during I guess you could call it distance learning. So it was the summer after distance learning, and I was staying up every night to watch these episodes, man. And I cannot tell you how hyped I was watching this one, man. It was some of the most excited I've been watching a Star Wars episode was this episode. I think there's so many great things in here. The crosshair conflict with the batch. They don't get much dialogue. I don't even remember if they necessarily see each other, but Crosshair gets outsmarted. He gets like blinded. I assume that's when they take the chip out of his head. Is after that, and the main highlight for me in this episode is as they're trying to make their desperate escape, we run into Cad frickin' Bane. And keep in mind, when this came out in 2021, the last time we had seen Cad Bane was like season 4 of Clone Wars. Season 4 of Clone Wars. So it had been a long time. And Cad Bane was one of my favorite characters, and they did him justice. They did him so much justice in this episode. That standoff between him and Hunter. Hunter literally has super senses, and he got sniped, man. He got shot. But he did end up getting a hit on Toto, which did end up aiding in Omega's escape. So it did do something at the end. But I thought that standoff was just that was the most hyped I've ever been, was watching that. That beat out Luke for me. That beat out Boba for me in Mando season 2. Beat out Ahsoka. I love that. I love Cad Bane so much. I think he was done dirty the next episode, but I think this episode he was so awesome. And this, I didn't use much brain picking this, but I just know I love this one in my heart. I love this one so much, so it has to be here.
Yeah.
Just a really fun episode where things start to come together.
Yeah. You said you didn't use much brain picking this. I kind of did use some brain because the following episode was probably the goofiest episode that this show has to
Yeah,
offer. And
yeah. That
it kind of
episode was
just
bad
does. It kind of just dragged down Cad Bane's appearance for me, even though that
for
moment is
sure.
cool. Number two for
It
me is
turned. It
the
made him so sad, dude.
yeah, yeah. Number two for me is the
Yeah.
Outpost. The Outpost. I rate this
Wait, did you do
episode.
number 3?
Uh, yeah, I did. My number three is Aftermath.
Oh,
My number two
okay.
for me is the Outpost. Outpost for me. This is of course one. This is the best episode of season two by far. If you were to say that this
Yeah.
episode is number one, I mean I can be convinced because this episode is a 10 out of 10. It is that good. Crosshair's turning point from a clone that we've never heard of, but he looks so dang cool and he has such a great sort of mindset with the Empire. He sort of is Mayday was of course the clone that Crosshair needed to meet in order to like sway his opinion, and seeing that they were just
Hmm.
all but sacrificial for nothing important is sort of just is it's the only way that they would have made Crosshair change his perspective on the Empire. And the highlight for me was Crosshair shooting that son of a Gundark commander, and it was cool. And then the most underrated part was seeing him on Tantus, because that basically set
Yes.
forward for not only the finale, but it set forward for season three as well. So yeah, this is why I have it really high, really high.
Yeah. Yeah. So my number 2 is one I think you had a bit lower, but it is season 1, episode. Let me see. Season 1, episode 15. Return to Camino.
Yeah,
So this episode is well. I mean, you said all that needed to be said about this episode. We get to see the batch together pretty much for the last time. Besides the next episode, they're fighting. They're working together for the last time for sure. And Omega's there too. And the dialogue in this episode is, like you said, it's unmatched. That the conversations that Crosshair has with Hunter are just phenomenal. and all the abandonment he feels and all the betrayal, and it's so great because this is one of those conflicts where both sides are kind of right and kind of wrong, and it's not so cut and dry, for right and wrong. So you talked about this episode already. It's phenomenal. The ending with the destruction of Camino was super emotional, super great, and it was a great sort of send off. Even though we did have two more seasons of the show, it was a great closing chapter to the clone era. Um, Destroying Camino for sure. That was sort of what kick-started the decommissioning of clones. Because after that point, when Camino got destroyed, most clones except for clone commandos and Wolf were like phased out completely.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, beautiful episode. You talked about that. I don't need to talk about that anymore. Let's move on to your number one.
My number one, if I were to change it right now, I'd say this is tied for number one. Uh, it's the cavalry has arrived. You'd probably be surprised by that.
Oh,
I think this episode has really high peaks from not only the batch but also surrounding characters that I believe both deserve it and don't really deserve it, but it's also really nice to see it. Of course, I mentioned the Rampart Nalase scene. Really cool, really cool. Even though I don't, for some reason, a lot of people didn't care about it. I think it was really cool to see, because it's another sort of outline point of view from the entire show as a whole. Because Rampart was, of course, the first main villain, and then Nalase was, of course, the victim. Even though she, of course, is sort of responsible for making the empire, but it's okay. We'll pass that. Shouts to fives. You're a real one. Um,
yeah,
yeah, and then Hemlock, of course, his arrogance, of course, becomes the death of him. As even though, because a couple episodes before, he has this conversation with Tarkin where we were like, well, Tarkin doesn't know that he's indispensable, and when we see his transmission in the finale, we're just like, okay, so yeah, he is, yeah, Tarkin is the real deal. He is going to find out if if you're competent or not. And of course, we see it basically the main highlight of this episode was for me is that it finalized everything that needed to be finalized, plus like a bit more. And I think all in all, this finale was just fulfilling, and seeing Omega's future is really cool. If there's any potential to bring back Rangers of the New Republic, it would be here having a live action Omega and bringing back live action Hera for that. I think that has amazing potential. I don't know why Lucasfilm isn't doing that, but I just think overall it has really high peaks, it has really good resolutions, and it's just fulfilling all in all. Yeah.
yeah. Absolutely. That one's a bit lower for me just because I think there were some things set up within the show, and I think if they get resolved in other shows, I will be completely happy. My number one, and I don't think this is a surprise to anybody, is The Outpost. Yeah, just a perfect episode for sure. I don't think anybody's gonna debate me on that. Um, this is what this show is all about, man. Um, this episode has it all. Besides the actual Bad Batch, it has it all. Um, just the conversations and the slow relationship building between Mayday and Crosshair, really really great in here. Um, and the just the both finding out. Well, Mayday already knows, but Crosshair finding out that they're just being disposed of like I don't even like crumbs. They don't matter. They're being sent almost like Pong Krell, bro. Like they're just being sent to die for nothing even useful that they could even win. Um, and I think the last like 10 minutes of this episode or 5 minutes, where they do go to destroy that cell, the rebel, not rebel cell, but the invaders, the raiders. Um, and they come back and they're all wounded and Mayday's about to die and the officer doesn't care. He shrugs them off and he tells them to get up and go to their ship, we're leaving or whatever like that. And um he tells him how disposable he is, and that's Crosshair's breaking point. Mayday actually dies, and he shoots him, which was cool. And so now he goes to Tantus, and we get a little scene with Emery, I believe. If that, I think that's this episode. Um, and yeah, that's great setup for the future. Great payoff for Crosshair's story. Even though he didn't get to see the batch this season, I think you really got some good stuff for sure. Um, just 10 out of 10. Great episode. One of the best
Yeah.
episodes in Star Wars, period.
Yeah. And that's going to be our list. Top 10 Bad Batch episodes, uh, sort of finalizing our thoughts. We started this show with a preview of the final season of the Bad Batch, and we have finally concluded. We will miss the Bad Batch greatly. Great show by Dave Filoni, Brad Rell, and
Yeah.
Jennifer Corbett for sure. Well, that being said, everybody, welcome back to the conclusion. We are done Ramblers Radio episode 11. Next week, we will be transitioning to Riverside because Discord is kind of bugged. It's kind of buns. So we're going to be transitioning over there next episode. It's basically a platform dedicated to podcasting. So we're gonna do that instead for episode 12. Surprise topic, like usual. Of course, this today's topic was pretty much predicted, but we usually do surprise topics because that's pretty cool. All right. With that being said, we will see you all next week. See you.
See you later.